Hi everyone! Yes, like I said, welcome to another episode of the Navs Effect on Playback. Commissioner Noli Eala is now in the room. I have invited him to come on the stage. So let's just wait for him to come on and we can converse with him about the latest going on in the PBA. I'm very excited to speak with Com Noli again. Always an insightful conversation. Hi everybody, thank you for your patience. We are now joined by Commissioner Noli Eala. Com, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for inviting. I cannot say no to you because you've been you've been a regular on my show. Thank you so much.
And it's my pleasure to always come on your show. It's always a fun time. Whenever I get an invite from your producer, Mike, I always say, okay, Friday night, I'm not going out. I'm going to sleep in early, prepare for my show early Saturday morning. Okay, come, let's get things started. So, big trade went down today in the PBA. Xavier Lucero, UP superstar we were talking about in our last podcast together, has been sent to Magnolia in exchange for Gio Halalon and Abu Tratter going from Magnolia to Northport. A few days ago, Ginebra traded Christian Stan Hardinger, Stanley Pringle, the number 10 pick, which turned out to be Mark Nonoy, to Terra Firma, who in return sent Stephen Holt, an MVP candidate as a rookie, Isaac Go, a promising young big man, and the number 3 pick, which turned out to be RJ Abarrientos. There's been a debate whether it's actually a fair trade between both sides or if Ginebra, like they have in the past, won a one-sided trade. Where do you stand in that, Com? How do you feel that trade and this recent trade today of Magnolia getting Xavier Lucero? Do you feel like those are fair trades?
Where I sit, because all the time, I always have believed that it's very difficult to actually judge a trade. No, again, trades are, in my opinion, should be the prerogative of teams. And at the end of the day, the PBA must just look in the way that if this was a decision of teams freely given and if it was a decision that was both parties came to it, then trade should always be approved. No, that has always been my position. The problem really, Naveen, and I think this is already very much accepted, is the fact that there are suspicions that these are not trades that are done by teams that are deciding independently. I think that is the problem, and that's where the problem lies. No, let's take for instance this particular case, the Terra Firma trade with Ginebra. Again, between two teams, two groups that have been trading for so long with each other and have had very controversial deals in the past. And that's where the suspicion comes in, no? Whether a trade is actually fair. And then you get this next trade just to complete the picture where, again, the San Miguel group is trading with Northport, another trading partner they have been doing deals with in the past. No, so if you are to look at the specific trades, that is obviously something that, as many people would have said, even Commissioner Willie has said, it all depends on really what teams would like. Again, I've always believed that teams will ask for the moon and everything else from another team if they can get it. And of course, the trading partner team would always have to want to get something in return that would also help their team. And it is up to the PBA to make sure that certain parity in the trade is achieved. It may not always be perfect parity, but there has to be a certain level of balance that will be achieved. No, whether this is to get a team to be competitive right away or to become younger, that's another issue. But a problem is when you look at these trades, the question is who's making the decisions. I don't mind the decision on the part of Ginebra and in this case Pure Foods in the latest trades because obviously they're getting good players. What I have to start questioning is on the other side of the equation, what are the teams that are trading with these San Miguel teams getting? And why are they agreeing to this? For instance, Northport, why are they giving up Ben Adamos, for instance, and why are they giving up Save Lucero? These are young players who obviously have a role to play in their teams, and they're giving up these players for, players who are a little bit older and players who are probably less impactful for them. So again, it is a question of not only fairness, but I guess the intent, whether or not this was made because it was really for the best interest of one particular team or for both teams. No, and in my estimation, and this is my biggest take here, Naveen. No, I don't think Northport should be treated as an independent team. I think Northport
Mm.
and Terra Firma, for that matter,
Is a
should
San
be
Miguel
looked at
team?
as part of a is connected to the San Miguel group, because if you look at their corporate structure, San Miguel owns these corporations. They have shares in these corporations, and so it is not truly an independent team. We know that, and I think they cannot deny this. Northport is partly owned by the Petron Group, by the San Miguel Group. Terra Firma is partly owned in I think it is their Asian cars by the San Miguel Group. So there must be something there in terms of the PBA rules being applied equally to both. I think that's where I stand. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of the trade itself, because I've always believed that trades should be allowed. It is good for the league to have so many trades. But when the trades become colored or tainted by interests controlling these teams, then I think that's where we start to question and be suspicious of trades.
Great thoughts. As always, we are joined by former PBA Commissioner Noli Eala, also the host of Power and Play every Saturday morning. You can find it on your favorite online airwaves. Thanks to our usual spectators in the house right now. I see JM, Karina, Nico, Tonio, Batax, Andre, Enzo, Paolo, Ron, a few others. And thanks to everyone tuning in for the first time to the channel. If you guys like what you're hearing, do subscribe to the channel. I am curious about something, Noli. The concept of one-sided trades between powerhouse teams, like in this case Ginebra, and what some people might consider farm teams, such as a Northport, a Terra Firma, was this already something prominent during your years as PBA commissioner? And when you were the PBA commissioner, were you ever faced with the dilemma of approving or denying trades that clearly favored one side? And how did you handle those situations, and were they received well by the teams whenever you would, like, say for example, have to decline or deny a trade?
Yes, this was already existing during my time. As you remember, at that time, there were three teams from San Miguel. This is Ginebra, Pure Foods, and of course San Miguel. At that time, Coca-Cola was considered a sister club by the board at the time, and so there was also certain restrictions. There were restrictions in terms of the trade between the San Miguel group and the Coca-Cola team at that time. And that was not only accepted by the public, but also by the board. It was the board that actually placed those restrictions when Coca-Cola entered the league. And, of course, at that time, Meralco was after my time. So, I didn't have to handle that side with the MVP group. But during the time, it was very, very clear. There were certain rules established not only during my time, but even before me. And it was actually Commissioner Rudy Salud who established rules for sister teams. Naveen, in the past, the rules were very, very specific and very strict. For instance, I'll tell you, sister teams cannot practice together. They cannot be seen together. They cannot have one official for one team, or for all of their teams, rather. They cannot scrimmage. They cannot use the same facility. It was very, very clear. And that was not during my time. This was even during the time of Rudy Salud, when they allowed San Miguel to have multiple teams, because they knew that the biggest threat to the PBA was the perception that there was disparity and that there was collusion among sister teams. But I'm sad to see now that all of these rules have become blurred, and in fact, some of them have already been disregarded. You know, um, Now you can see that certain officials of certain teams can sit in any team, clearly just showing that they control all of the teams together. Now you can see that this concept of a conduit has become a very popular form of way to move players around. And of course, now we're beginning to see also that certain companies have come in that still have links already to certain teams, but are not being considered as sister teams. And this is my problem. This is really the problem that I think the PBA has. I think it's about time for the board to really review the rules on sister teams. And I know it is a tough act because you're talking about maybe what, eight, nine teams or out of 12 that will be in two groups. But that's the reality. Now, I think if they do not want to become strict with respect to these teams, you might as well just take out the restrictions, because then you become more transparent. Then you just set certain rules with respect to trading among teams, so that you don't even start bothering developing teams or farm teams, as you call it. Because now what's happening is farm teams are forced not to develop because they're just being used to cultivate talent, and then which is passed later on to the bigger name teams. No, so if you just take out those lines, just let the teams deal with each other, maybe the farm teams might be able to keep their talents, and that will not force sister teams to use a conduit. It's a very difficult balance, a very difficult juggle. But the first thing that has to be accepted is that there is certainly a blurring of the lines. I think the PBA has to either be very strict or completely just open it up and just put on certain rules. I think right now they are in between. They don't know what to do. They want to help the farm teams, but at the same time, the farm teams are being used as conduits. So it's just
Mm.
not going to happen. They're never going to develop. You see Terra Firma in its list of picks that they've had in the past, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 years. They've traded away all of their number one picks, or at least their top two picks in the league, and that's certainly not a good sign. That's clearly a sign that this team is not interested in developing, and they're just there to help out other teams, and that is going to be a huge problem for the PBA moving forward.
Let's get to some comments here and some thoughts from the spectators. JM says it's hard to control parity. We can say that Premier League, MLB, and even F1 have parity issues. Tonyo has a question for Com Nolly here. The farm team issue, do you think it's a PBA leadership issue, Com Nolly?
I would have to say yes, it is a leadership issue. I don't understand, and frankly, I don't understand how some team owners and some governors are able to accept the system right now. I really don't see why this is being tolerated.
Well,
Um,
so Yang Yao in particular has been very outspoken about this.
yes, yes, and I share some of his views, although not all, but I share many of his views. That it's very clear that the bigger teams or the top teams are get more favorable, I guess, passes than some of the independent teams. So what I don't understand is why is this not being acted upon by the board? Well, of course, I'm begging the question, but I guess everybody knows the answer.
Well, another good, interesting question here from RC Com. Are you in favor of abolishing the salary cap and draft and instead create a developmental league where the PBA teams have their own farm teams, just like in the 1980s when PABL and MICAA was still around, provided all teams are capable of competing? What do you feel about that?
I do not believe in abolishing the salary cap. What I believe in is that the salary cap cannot be simplistic, neither can it be myopic. I think that the salary cap is already passe in terms of the rules that they have. These are rules that have been in existence for over 25 years. And I think it's time for the PBA to review and make these rules more complex for teams to follow. And I've always pushed this. In fact, the last person I spoke to was the governor of Meralco, Attorney Bill Pamintuan. And I mentioned this to him. I said, perhaps you can send somebody to study the CBA and the salary cap rules of the NBA. It's no longer just this simplistic way of they submit their salaries and you compute it and that's it. And then when they trade, you just compare the salaries, and it's a very simplistic system. And I don't believe that this is working. I don't believe, however, that you should abolish it. I think there should still be a set of rules by which these teams have to play. I think you need to increase the salary cap tremendously so that the PBA can become more competitive. But I don't believe in abolishing the salary cap rules.
All right, let's take one question here about the PBA structure and your time as commissioner before we move on to the PBA draft. Pino wants to know, Commissioner, would it be fair to say that you are Al Francis Chua's predecessor in SMC? And what was your part in terms of, what some might say were unfair trades? Do you agree that some of the trades during your time there could be considered unfair, or do you have your side of the story in terms of how it all went down?
Yes, I was his predecessor. I created that position, and I certainly put order into the San Miguel SMC program. And if you will notice, never once during my time did I ever sit in any bench. Never once did I come close to any bench because I never sat on the board of the PBA because I was working to create a program for the company. Now, in terms of the trades, of course, we tried to get the best trades we could, and we did. But that time, the commissioners, when I was working as SMC sports director, were very, very strict and very, very objective. We would propose trades, and it was the commissioners that made me and all of our teams change those trades. So clearly, we were being policed, and I've always mentioned that teams will want to have the best players be part of their team so that they can win a championship. It is up to the PBA to ensure that the trades are fair, and it's up to the PBA to make sure that the rules are followed.
All right. And who was the commissioner during your time with SMC that
When I
was
was in SMC, it was Sunny Barrios, and then it was a little bit of Chipo Salud during
all
my time.
right?
Yeah,
Got this. Basket BPH, nice to see you on the stream. Of course, a usual spectator here. The Navs Effect on Playback says, Come, I'm a fellow San Pableño. Always been a proud one when you were sitting the commissioner. JM says, Kenneth Duremdes and Alvin Patrimonio receive 500,000 a month. The max today is 420,000 pesos per month. It is absurd. It must match today's inflation rate. Okay, let's go now to the PBA draft because, Commissioner, if there's two positive developments for the PBA, in my opinion, over the last few weeks, it was one, Meralco winning the championship over San Miguel. I thought that Meralco finally breaking in after 14 tries, or I think it was 13, 14 tries, winning a championship for the first time and beating a team like San Miguel in the process. It gives hope to the other teams in the PBA. And to me personally, it just added some excitement because it added some unpredictability, which is what we've been wanting for the PBA for a while now. And another positive development, I feel, aside from the trade that had some people questioning the PBA again, but to be fair, some people also felt that the trade was fair. But overall, the excitement for the draft that took place on Sunday, we're recording this on Monday, July 15th, the excitement was palpable. We felt it because of the names entering, because of the likes of Baltazar and Bearfield and David Defonso and RJ Abarientos. Like, these are guys who's, in Dave's case, he's dad, and RJ's case, he's uncle, not to make you feel old, Commissioner. But these were guys who are second generation, and the first
right.
generation were playing when you were a broadcaster, when you were a
Yeah.
commissioner. So to see the talent go from one generation to the next and now come into the PBA, it adds like a little nostalgic feel to it, but also adds some excitement. And you can't deny that the talent of basketball now, I think more than ever, is just incredible. What these guys can do now on the basketball court in terms of athleticism, skill development, skill training, international exposure, it's one of a kind. Even guys who played abroad like Dave and RJ, they come back to the Philippines and they're better basketball players for it, and they'll be pro ready by the time they get to the PBA. And then we haven't even gotten to guys like Evan Nelly, who somehow dropped to the second round to Northport, which means that he might end up in San Miguel in the future. And then you have someone like Francis Escandor or Jerome Lastimosa. Even if he's injured, he's going to Magnolia. I heard that Magnolia picked Lastimosa over Nelly because Lastimosa impressed them in a tune-up game between the Gilas Sea Games team and Magnolia a few months ago. And there's just so much talent, so much excitement. Even in the second and third rounds, there were people there who you were like, that guy could be a pro for quite a while. So, what did you think overall about how the PBA draft went down? And are you excited about the names and the talent coming in? Do you think this might be that little spike in energy and excitement the PBA needs in terms of star power and names, adding prestige to the brand?
I really think that the this year's draft was very impactful in terms of boosting not only the image of the PBA but also the game, its game. Insofar as the image is concerned, having players who played abroad, who played in the B League and who played in the KBL, come back and join the PBA draft is a big victory for the PBA. This just shows that there's nothing to fear. At the end of the day, even at their prime, they will come back, and these players will still return and showcase their talents in the PBA. So I think that was a big win. I think it's a vote of confidence for the PBA and, of course, the teams. It may not necessarily be the reason for it, but obviously the effect on the PBA is huge in terms of its image. That it is still a Premier League that is considered, that players consider it to be the Premier League in Asia. Now, in terms of the game, I believe that many of the players that were drafted are players that can immediately help their teams. I think this is a big plus again for the PBA, because these are players that have experience. These are players that obviously have championship caliber or championship pedigree, and also have basketball pedigree. So I think like a Justin Baltasar or Cedric Bearfield will immediately be impactful to their teams. I think all the way in the first round, you see names that are very useful, very athletic, very talented. I like Junel Policarpi, for instance. I think he's a guy that obviously was a under below the radar until he became the MVP of the draft combine. I like the fact that Jerome Lastimosa was picked up by Magnolia. Obviously, they were looking at him to replace Gio Halalon, and I think he fits that role perfectly. One guy that I've been very high about is Mark Nonoy. I think Mark Nonoy is a very underrated player. He's still first round, but this is a guy that when I first saw him play with LaSalle, I thought he was the second coming of Jason Castro. He has quickness, he has athleticism, he has range. The only problem with Mark Nonoy, of course, is his ability to control himself. He plays beyond what is required of him. So that's another guy. I think Francis Escandor is a very good player. You've got Payawal. You've got so many other players. Kalen Tiongson, of course, is a very experienced guy coming into the game. And so there was a dearth of big men, obviously. But, at this point, I think the excitement comes from the fact that you can see that these players are going to actually help their teams. And I think that will help the game and the popularity of the teams. Evan Nelly, CJ Cancino, these are guys that are very, very popular among the UEAP and collegiate crowd, and I think they will also bring their fans to the PBA. So overall, I think this was a net plus for the PBA. I think the teams did well in selecting their players. Obviously, Ginebra, RJ Abarientos is a name that will be followed for a very long time, and I'm very happy that Tim Cohn gets his Abarientos back, and I think it'll be very exciting. So I believe that this year's PBA draft is really going to be a impactful one, and I hope that it will bring in the crowds that is badly needed by the PBA into back to the arenas.
Awesome, awesome. The critical part now is over this next week, right? Because that's how much time the teams have to sign the players that they drafted. And naturally, there are going to be guys, maybe those who are selected in the fourth, the third rounds, maybe some of those in the second round too, who won't be signed because of limited roster spots. For example, Rain or Shine has 2 open roster spots, but they also had 2 first round picks. Then they had 3 picks in the second round. We already saw them trade one of their second round picks, Miggy Corteza, to Blackwater in exchange for a future second round pick in 2026. With that said, there are also going to be other players. I think over the next few days, we're going to hear about them maybe going back to the MPBL or joining the practice squad, but not making the main roster. So that probably begs the question: is it time for the PBA to add a few teams, maybe 2 teams, to the league, given the amount of talent coming in, the talent spread out even in different parts of the world? But if we do have expansion and add 2 more PBA teams, I mean, what's stopping these 2 more PBA new teams coming in from being quote unquote farm teams, right?
Well, I think that's you hit it right on the head there, Naveen. No, there's nothing wrong with adding a couple of teams. Obviously, that will bring a new set of audience or a new set of following. It's the simplest thing to do, to add 2 new teams. The hardest part is again trying to achieve relative parity, relative competitiveness. We've seen that the last expansion that the PBA has not been successful. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, Terra Firma and Blackwater are still at the bottom of the pack. They have not been able to show that they can win and they will win. there are no signs that these teams, in fact, I've said it in the past that they even have intentions of winning. Maybe one of them, and it's not. That's not the way the expansion system comes in. If you want to expand, it's not only because you want to give jobs to players, but because you want the league to be more competitive, considering that there is a lot of talent. But if the expansion will mean just getting more lopsided games, more one-sided games, and teams that will not be patronized by the fans, then that's not going to help the PBA at all. So I think before they even think about expansion, I think they have to start thinking about, again, fixing the salary cap. I think they have to start looking at settling the schedules that they have, becoming more consistent in their formats, finding their true role in the whole scheme of things for the national team, so that the league is not bothered and it's not unnecessarily disrupted most of the time. And finally, I think they have to start thinking about balancing, the rosters. That's a very tough job to do for the league office, but it can be done. It's just a matter of really finally putting your foot down and saying that I want to make sure that that the games will be entertaining and fun for the fans and not predictable at all. So I think these are things that the PBA must consider first before they start looking at expanding again.
Awesome. Let's get to some questions here now. Thank you for your thoughts. We are joined by former PBA Commissioner Noli Eala, also the host of Power and Play. The MPBL, can it possibly be the main pro league of our country one day? JLem wants to know your side, and what can you say are the main differences between the PBA and the MPBL, the way you watch it?
The MPBL is an awesome league. It's a tremendous idea. Senator Manny Pacquiao actually used to play in my league, Liga Pilipinas, and he actually told me, I got your idea, and I'm very happy to have shared the Liga Pilipinas concept to Senator Manny, who had the team in my league at the time. Of course, this was not original with me. This was the NBA, and I've always believed in regionalism. I've always believed that basketball should be moving out of Metro Manila, and there's so much more talent out there that can be discovered, and bringing the game closer to the fans, and obviously developing the infrastructure in the countryside, and making sure that the game is spread even more equitably in other areas. But the problem with the MPBL is that number one, I think talent is still not at that level that provides the kind of basketball that is really at the very high quality. I think once the MPBL is able to streamline its rules as well in terms of salaries and ownership, I think it can become a more potent force. I think the MPBL is also a little bit politicized. Many of these teams are come and go. There's no real stability, and therefore, and usually it happens during a political season where many teams are coming in because it is given backing by the local politicians. So again, I think they need stability in their team ownership, and of course sustainability in their programs. I think it's a very expensive system. It's a very expensive format. I know this because I ran a league like that for 3 years, but it's not impossible. It's really not impossible with the technology now, and of course with the infrastructure in terms of transportation now. It's not impossible, and I think the PBA should look at this format. There's no harm. They should start looking at trying to develop affinity with the provinces. Not only just bringing their games once a week, or a couple of times a month, but I think they should really start adopting cities and trying to see a format where they can be playing more games outside of Metro Manila.
Awesome. Great thoughts as always. Let's get to some more questions here. Do you think the PBA itself lacks marketing? Visible yung marketing during your time, even though there was no social media yet. So what do you think about the current marketing state of the PBA?
I think they're trying their best. We have to give it to them, but I think it's still lacking. I've always believed that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everything has already been laid out to them by the NBA, and you can see how it can be developed. Social media is obviously a big part of sports right now, but beyond that, the platforms of delivery of your product has to be improved. That's something that the PBA, I think, still needs to put a little more effort. 20 years ago, I was already talking about a PBA channel. 20 years ago, I was already talking about a PBA Coliseum. your own venue, so that you can have more games that under your control, and it becomes more consistent. During my time, we were playing 100 games, and we were committing that to the television coverage, 100 games a year, and only because we were limited by venue. But can you imagine if they had their own venue? How many games a year you can play and you can control? That's where now you can look at expansion. That's where now you can look at putting up other leagues, because now you have full control of your venue. That was 20 years ago, Naveen. And up to now, that idea has not been touched on. We're still playing in small venues. The games are not consistent. We play sometimes in a particular area, then another area, and that's why the fans are confused. Running a league is about consistency. It's about forming habits. That's something that the PBA has lost because of the disruptions in their calendar. Fans have lost the habit of going to the games has been disrupted, and that's something the PBA has to return, and that's where marketing comes in. You've got to market the league so that the fans know exactly where you're going to be playing 6 months from your game, so that fans can prepare, they can do their budget, and they can obviously enjoy the games way before, and make sure that there are people in the stands. So I think there's a lot to be desired in terms of marketing. And again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's so easy. I think the PBA just has to open its eyes a little more.
We're now joined by Commissioner Noli Eala, former PBA commissioner and also one of the prominent faces of Philippine sports. Getting to some questions here and some thoughts from the spectators. The PBA arena concept was great, says RC. The PBA can even lease it to the MPBL, PSL, UAAP, and NCAA in the off-season. Jokichek says there's a surplus of good players in the country. PBA should expand by legitimizing farm teams, increase the salary cap to be shared by Team A and Team B. Interesting. Team A cannot have more than 5 max players. Only Team Bs will pick in the draft for the strength of Team A in the previous year. Rookies must play at least 1 year in conference for Team B before being elevated to Team A. Team A's cannot trade with their Team A's. Only Team Bs have a PBA game every day. Something similar to the Division 1, 2, 3 concept of the B League, which I think they're really running pretty smoothly right now.
Mhm.
Now, there was a question here from Basket BPH. I want to ask your thought on this, Com. And Basket BPH has come. Are we in the wrong to criticize Commissioner Willie Marshall? What do you think about the job he has done so far?
Commissioner Willie is a very good friend of mine. He came into the league with me. We came into the league together, and obviously his experience is vast. His knowledge of the PBA is tremendous. It's deep, and he's got the trust and confidence of the board and of the team owners. No, and I think that is really the things that are working for Com Willie. I think his intentions are pure. I know Willie. I think he really wants to improve the PBA. I think he really wants to do a good job. But his perceived associations with certain interests is the one that's really hurting Com Willie. I think his independence and impartiality is sometimes being questioned because of the perceptions surrounding his administration, and that cannot be taken away. I mean, fans will talk, and obviously, he cannot seclude himself from everyone else. He's got to work with the entire board. But I think what Com Willie needs to do, and this is from my heart, I think he needs to take hold of the commissioner's office, passing off his duties to a trade committee, passing off certain duties to members of the board is not good for a PBA commissioner. That was never the idea of the founding fathers of the PBA. The PBA commissioner was always a strong personality. I remember one time the founding commissioner, Commissioner Leo Prieto, when I became commissioner, talked to me. He hosted a lunch for me as the new commissioner with all of the other past commissioners. And the only thing that he told me is that you are the commissioner, and all you have to say to everyone else is that ask their position and then you make a decision. That is how it's supposed to go. That is the way the Constitution was crafted, and your decision must be respected. And until you have that kind of respect, the PBA will run well. I think Com Willie has the respect. I think he just doesn't want to ruffle some feathers, but I think it's time for him to take stock of the position of commissioner. I think he has to take on all of the responsibilities that has been given to a commissioner under the PBA Constitution and not pass it on or delegate it to someone else for fear that the board will be displeased. At the end of the day, it is a decision that he has got to make, whether it's for the league or he's out of the league.
Noted. Great answer, of course, as always. There was someone who asked this question earlier, and I didn't get to ask it earlier, but I am very curious. During your time as commissioner, who would you say were the guys or the guy that you had to bring into your commissioner office most often? Sabihin natin yung kinailangan may palo ng konti.
I think that's well documented. A lot of during my term, there were a lot of fines, penalties, and not only with players but also with coaches. So I don't have to name all of them, but we've become friends with many of them already, and a lot of those issues have been in the past. But certainly, during that time, a commissioner will have fewer friends, and I think that's part of the game. That's part of the job. I mean, if you are there for the popularity and to gain more friends at the expense of your job, then I think you're not doing a good job.
The commissioner spot, did you apply for it, or was it something that someone suggested to you and then you became aware? Was it always your intention to be PBA commissioner?
No, it was not. As you know, at the time, I was a practicing lawyer. I got into broadcasting because it is my interest, my love. Basketball was my love. The PBA, that was my childhood, I guess, companion every night, going home, listening to the radio or watching TV during dinner. So it was not. It was not something that I had dreamed of to become commissioner. But when I was already part of the PBA in the broadcast panel, and then one day, of course, Commissioner June Bernardino stepped down because of health reasons. I know that already at the time there were some favorites to become commissioner, but I think the PBA at the time was looking for fresh blood, and that's when I came in without knowing anyone. I didn't know anyone in the PBA board. Nobody, none of the teams. Only thing that I was equipped with was I was a practicing lawyer then. I knew the law. I was also in media. I had covered the PBA games. I had also been in marketing because I had a events management company at the time. And lastly, I was a fan, a big fan. And when we were asked, somebody asked me to, why don't you give your name as part of the shortlist? And I did. And it was all, it came down to that. I made a presentation to the board about what I thought was wrong with the PBA and what I thought I could do. And they liked it. And at the end of the day, they voted for me. There were other things that happened during that process that I will not reveal anymore in public, but it was actually a very contentious time, including some interference from the highest government officials of the country. But, at the end of the day, I got the vote of confidence, and that's where, I was voted as commissioner.
Do you remember what were some of the plans you wanted to implement by becoming commissioner that you can say is still an action today in the league, and it started because of your ideas?
Yeah, I had what I called the fourth quarter storm plan. It was a series of plans that I presented to the board after a few months into my term. Basically, it was three things. Number one was changing the calendar of the PBA, which up to now, well, they were doing. Remember before it used to be a start in February, March, April. That was about the start of the PBA. I thought that, and I was already thinking forward that we had to synchronize our calendar with the international calendar, because eventually I thought the PBA players will be needed by the national team. So that's why we moved the opening of the PBA to October, which was really already the after the international calendar. The international calendar is about July to about September. So that's why we can see the Olympics here. At the time, you can see the World Championships there, etc., etc. So that was the first plan. The second plan was for the PBA to fully support the national team. At the time, we were only sending players to the Asian Games. The PBA board did not approve of sending players to FIBA competitions. I was the first commissioner that pushed for players to join the national team and play in FIBA sanctioned tournaments. And if you remember, the first one was back in 2005, which we hosted. That was the Champions Cup. And then that's where the entire BAP thing came in, and we were suspended, etc., etc. But that was the start until 2008, where the PBA was fully involved in the forming of the national team in Tianjin. So again, these are 2009. Before that, it was the Gilas Smart Gilas program. So that was the second thing. And the third one that I had proposed was a two-conference format. I changed the three conference format to two for a couple of reasons. Mainly, I thought three conferences cheapened championships. I mean, you finish a championship, you play again, you win, you play again. I thought players were not motivated enough to play because anyway, there's another conference that's going to be played in a couple of weeks, and I thought it was just making titles and championships cheap. So I thought we just play two conferences, one a main conference, which is all Filipino, which is the most prestigious anyway, and the second conference would be an import-laden conference wherein maybe we can really open it up to the big imports. No, so that was the three main things that I pushed, which were all approved by the board, and which was for a while being implemented. I think the conference the scheduling used to be followed, but now it's all blurred again. We don't know when it's going to start. The PBA just starts whenever they want to. So no, this is not the right way to run a league. We're still following, using players in the national team, but the two conference format is come and go depending again. But as you can see, it is more useful, especially in the setup of FIBA now. The fourth and last proposal I made there, Naveen, was I wanted eventually just one championship. I called it the One Philippine Championship, but it incorporated like an in-season tournament in that One Philippine Championship. I was way ahead of the NBA, Naveen. I'm not carrying my own chair here. In that One Philippine Championship, I had a format where there would be a champion for the all Filipino. Then they bring in their imports. There will be a champion, but all the records are carried over all the way to one national championship. That was the plan. And at the time, you can even ask Tim Cohn about this. He liked the plan. Fred Uytengsu liked the plan, but he thought it was too ambitious and maybe we could wait a little more. But that was really the ultimate plan. And of course, there were other little things like I mentioned. I wanted a PBA Coliseum. I wanted sports betting. In fact, we already started sports betting at the time with Pagcor. It was an official sports betting site in venue alone, not in public. And of course, I wanted my own PBA channel at that time. So there were concrete plans that were being pushed for maybe 6 to 8 years down the line. And up to now, those plans I think are pretty good. But the PBA I guess, has not seen it, and we're still using the old system of just of just bidding out our own coverages. Again, I hope somehow the PBA can move on and become more modern and go with the times.
Got a comment here from Luke saying you were so ahead of your time, Commissioner. That's true. I mean, Arena Plus is now a major sponsor of the PBA. They are a betting website. Still no PBA Coliseum, which I agree would be good. There kind of is a PBA channel with PBA Rush on Signal,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't say that might have been something that came up during your time because back then, well, now it's easier too with the streaming and online, how you can watch
You,
online, whether
you,
that's on your phone or iPad,
Naveen,
and yeah.
what I'm proud
Yeah.
of is many of the people running the television coverage now were people that I introduced to the PBA,
Mm.
including Shena Olaso, who's now head of Signal TV. She started with me. I introduced her to the PBA, and the rest is history. And I know that I discussed the PBA channel with her before. So many of these people that are now working in the PBA were people that I brought in. Even their corporate secretary, Attorney Melvin Mendoza, was my partner in the law office. Of course, Willie Marshall was my executive assistant. So many other guys there, and they have all made impactful contributions to the PBA, and that's why I'm quite happy. I just wish that they continue innovating because I think that's where the PBA lacks innovation.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes here left with Commissioner Noli Eala before he has to get going. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit as we wait for the final questions. You're a 76ers fan, right, Commissioner Noli?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, what do you think about your off-season moves? Getting Paul George, adding Caleb Martin. You got a TikTok dancer as your rookie, and of course, you still have Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. What do you guys think now? You can challenge Boston?
Absolutely. We're looking for banner 4. No, really, seriously, I think the offseason moves of Darren Morey has been amazing. I questioned him for a while in my mind why he didn't make any moves during the trade deadline last season when they didn't improve the roster. But obviously, all of that was to save the cap coming into this in particular season, this free agency season. And he's done a magnificent job, bringing in of course, Paul George, and then you have Caleb Martin, you have Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon. You
I'm
bring in
still bitter about you guys stealing Caleb Martin, by the way. Just saying, a little bit bitter, but go.
and now we've signed Kyle Lowry. We've signed our two rookies, Jared McCain and of course Adem Bona. And I think there's a good chance that we'll be picking up a couple of vet minimum contracts here. So I'm very, very positive, optimistic about the chances of the Sixers. I think we are knocking. Boston remains the benchmark, but I think we're closing in on that gap right now.
JM, a Knicks fan, says, with all due respect, you have to go through New York first. Well,
Yes, yes,
New
sir.
York, New York
Oh,
did beat Philadelphia in the playoffs. And, are you over the way that Game 2 loss happened already, Commissioner? Sorry to bring it up, but
I'm never over losses of the of Philadelphia. It goes through my mind over and over again. But remember, hey, the New York Knicks fan, remember Joel Embiid was not 100%. Remember that during the time when Joel Embiid was healthy, we were at the top of the Eastern Conference for a few days, few
mm-hmm.
games. We were the ones that top. It was Milwaukee, Boston, and Philadelphia for a while that was on top of the Eastern Conference. We dropped when Joel Embiid became injured, dropped all the way to ninth. And then when he came back, we won 11 straight and we went up to number, I think, 6 or 7. So, definitely health will be an issue. But I think the New York Knicks, it will be exciting because the New York Knicks have stocked up and I like what they've done. And I'm a big fan of Jalen Brunson. I think it'll be an exciting season come next November.
Interesting. All right. Bomper that says, I saw somewhere that Jared McCain is a Phil. I'm not sure if it's true. Yeah, I'm not sure too, but maybe we should do some research. Luke says, Maxi is lit. Getting Drummond back is a low key awesome move for Philly. Yes, giving Embiid a backup center. The problem is Embiid is never healthy, says JM. Well, that has been
Yes,
an issue for a while. So the PBA is about to get to its 49th season, and we are a year away from the 50th season of the PBA, which, for all reasons, is a big number, right? It's historic. It goes to show how long the PBA has been in our lives. You can make a case that not only our parents but even our grandparents, the PBA was already a factor back
absolutely.
then. And it's something that I'm not sure if it's being passed down from generation to the next quite like before, but there are still many people out there who watch the PBA in large part because it was something they spent doing with their families, with their dads, with their friends, uncle, aunts, lolo, lola. Now, for the 50th season of the PBA, let's say, for example, I think I asked you something similar last time, but let's say you were marketing head for a day, or they hired you, the PBA. Okay, Nolly, you are going to be our marketing head. How do we make the 50th season special? What things do we do differently? What aspects do we introduce? How do we make year 50 special? Go.
Well, I think there's got to be a lot of build-up, a build-up for the 50th year. I mean, we have a saying in Filipino that ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan, hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. And I think the PBA has to look back at what made it so stable in its journey getting to the 50th year. And I think, one thing I'm very proud of is staging the Toyota Crispa game, the reunion game, and it has never been done, and I was able to pull that one off. It was a huge success. Never filled up Araneta like that. And, that was the last time we ever saw Jaworski and Fernandez play together. And, I'm a big fan. So, I always think as a fan. And I think that's how the PBA should be building the 50th season. They should be thinking as a fan. What do fans want? Maybe a Pure Food Ginebra reunion game. I don't know. There has to be a build-up. That's one. Secondly, I think the PBA should have something tangible that it can show for the 50th season. And, it's too late to build the Coliseum now, obviously. But there's got to be something tangible, not just the game, to remember the PBA all these years. Maybe a bronze statue of whoever, somewhere that the fans can actually emulate. Maybe not only a statue, maybe statues. I don't know. There's got to be something that will mark the 50th anniversary of the PBA. And thirdly, I think this is the time where you give back to the fans. I think there has to be a lot of innovation in that year. Maybe a completely new look in terms of the broadcast coverage, in terms of the floors. This is another thing, Navina. Why is volleyball so popular? Why does it look so good on television? Not only because of the way the women are playing this game, but it's the look of the court. Everywhere you go, there's only one look for volleyball. You look at the PBA, they still use, different courts. I cannot believe that at this time, when they brag that they make over 100 million, 200 million pesos, they cannot buy their own court, their own wooden floor at the Araneta. Maybe a couple. You know how much that is? That's so cheap. I don't understand why they cannot do that. Maybe that's something that they should buy. They have their own court, one look wherever they go. Remember, the PBA is sports entertainment. It is the biggest sports entertainment platform of the country, maybe Asia. Create it that way. Make it look, before my thinking, the opening of the PBA was the Super Bowl of the US. I would make it so big because it was the Super Bowl of the Philippines. Now, the opening is just another opening. I would spend. The board would say no. I would spend. I would make sure that it was good. Or if I didn't get my budget, I would still make sure it looked good, even on a smaller budget. But that's important. So I think these are things. It's the look. It's just the perception that it is new. There's something has been done. For the last 5 to 7 years, maybe, I don't see any kind of feeling that it is new, that the PBA has become new. Nothing. I mean, really, aside from the great play of the players, and you have to credit all of the players, the PBA itself has not shown anything substantial to say that it is a new league, that it has improved, that it has grown. I think from the court to the look of the stands, everything that they do, I think there's just got to be a disruption, which I did in my time. That was my marketing strategy, a disruption strategy, just to make sure that the people understand that there is a new PBA. So 50th, as you said, is a big year. I hope that they make it really special for the fans and make it look like it's not just celebrating the 50th, but it's celebrating the first year of a new era.
Great thoughts as always, Commissioner Noli Eala. Good comment here from JM. I hope we get Beanie in Golden Season, a Beanie performance for the 50th season of
Oh,
the PBA.
I'll give you another thought. Why don't they invite Jokoy to host the thing, the 50th anniversary of the
Mm.
PBA? These are ideas that will cost them, but these are things that you give back to the fans, and then you open up the gates to fans to watch. The objective should be every game should be filled up. That should be the objective for the PBA.
Absolutely amazing. Of course, thank you to Commissioner Noli Eala for joining us. Last question. Have you been watching House of the Dragon?
Unfortunately, no. I've been finishing some other series.
Okay, well, you have to add that to your list, Commissioner Nolly. Thanks to everyone who tuned in tonight. Thanks, of course, to Commissioner Nolly Yala for joining us. Watch his show Saturday morning, Power and Play. It's on Facebook. I appear there from time to time.
Absolutely.
And yeah, just thank you so much for your time, Commissioner Nolly Yala.
Thank
It's
you.
always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Naveen.
See you next time and hope to have you back.